Hello, everyone. It is me. I'm a nerd politics, and today I want to talk again. I know I've kind of talked about the polls, but the polls have drastically changed since Tim Walz was picked as the running mate for Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee for running against Donald Trump and JD Vance, as well as Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Nicole Shanahan. I I do believe I cannot state a time. Obviously, in a time I've been born, there has never been a third party candidate so popular like this. But I can also not remember a timeline where a third party candidate has had a vice president with them running against each other, which all three now having vice presidents. It's a very crucial race. Um, I can't say Ross Perot had one, even as a reformist back in the 1996 election. I just don't remember any research I've done. There's not been any vice president that Ross Perot has had on with that. But with that being said, obviously Tim Walz was probably not a great idea, not a great pick. Um, Obviously, if Kamala Harris wanted to be strong and not so radically left about this whole decision making, she probably would have, or probably should have, chose Josh Shapiro. But a lot of people don't like Josh Shapiro. He's popular in Pennsylvania, but a lot of people don't like him because from what I hear, is that he's Jewish, and there's nothing wrong with being Jewish. But as you would come to know right now, is that a lot of idiot, dumb brain, nothing, just nothing people, uh, usually college students, just a lot of dumb brain, stupid idiots on college campuses are fighting against the Jews in order for Palestine to win, even though Palestine started the war. So, it's you got a lot of idiots there. So obviously, Jewish people haven't been liked for a long time. That's come to no surprise. But it's gotten worse within the last year, roughly. So that's why they probably didn't pick Josh Shapiro. Now, Tim Walz, he's the current governor of, he's the current governor of Minnesota. Not a popular governor, by the way. Tim Walz was only 52% back in, what was it, 2022. He won Minnesota by 52%. Most of his voters don't even like him now. He's also had a lot of controversy back in 2020 with the whole George Floyd situation when back then he was telling people to burn their own state down. He was literally letting people burn their state down because of a guy who got assaulted by police, which is not the way you respond to that. I'm sorry, but burning down an entire state in response to a guy getting hurt and assaulted and beat up by police is not the thing we're trying to assume is the right answer, because it's not the right answer. And, I have a little picture up here. I'm watching Red Eagle Politics, and, it fits perfectly with Tim Walz saying, I'll let you burn down the city. And, of course, Kamala Harris is the one that wants to defund police and saying, I will raise your funds to bail you out. Because if you don't know, Kamala Harris was an attorney, not a very popular attorney in California. She wasn't even liked in her home state in San Francisco as an attorney. She would arrest thousands of African Americans for marijuana usage or the possession of marijuana and would usually keep them in prison over the timeline that they were supposed to without bail, with very few times with bail or with any rehabilitation abilities. So there's that to count in. But when it came to like murder, when it came to graping people, as I will go by because YouTube will automatically age restrict this video if I say the other thing, she didn't care about it. It wasn't to her interest. It was marijuana possession or use. That was her whole thing, and it really doesn't make a great self-image on her. But Tim Walz, he's just not. He's not a smart. I don't think he's that very smart. Um, he's destroying his own state. and it's not his home state. His home state's Nebraska, but we already know Nebraska's a guaranteed red state here by and large. But Minnesota is coming up to be a red state because not even the people in the state like him. But anyhow, I'm gonna shut up and I'm gonna label the safe states for Kamala Harris. Just get that out of the way. Get out of the way. And the first district here, as well as the second district in Nebraska. So 139, pretty solid. Donald Trump here, most of the West here. Nebraska by and large. A lot of the East he's also gaining in as well, with Ohio and Iowa. Iowa obviously won amazingly in the primaries against everyone else for the Republican primaries. So it's obviously say that it's a safe state, Republican state there. But Ohio is J.D. Vance's home state, so obviously I think it's strong in that realm as well as I'd say Alaska as well, and also the first district of Maine. So a 149 to 139, we're obviously it's looking really good right now. Obviously, this guy RFK Jr. He's just there because he matters, but not electoral vote wise. Really, only popular vote wise. But I can't estimate and say how much he's going to get on the independent popular vote first per se, because I can't estimate those numbers. I can't. I don't know how many people are willing to vote this year. So let's go into. And also, I want to put in Texas and Florida, and the only reason I'm putting that is that Texas has been shown over the course of like 8 years to go only up and up for Republicans. Like Texas, 8% for Republicans to now over 12% for Republicans. And the same thing with Florida is that Florida used to be this battleground state for Democrats for a lot of the early 2000s, barely won in 2000, barely won in 2004, lost to Democrats in 2008 and 2012, and regained in 2016 barely, but has since then became a very stronger, more state. So I would like to believe those are safe states as well. Going into likely Democratic, I would say Colorado is a likely Democratic state. My home state has not had very other changes that validate any reason for it to change. Like what I'm saying is that I don't think it's going to change. I think that most voters, because a lot of people are too young in the state to vote, so a lot of the current voters are going to vote Democrat. Same thing with New Mexico, especially with the border crisis. It's another thing where it's just a lot of people are too young to vote, so can't make up the decision for the border at the moment. Illinois, actually, I'd put as a strong state here. I would have said, pre Tim Walz and probably pre Kamala Harris that it was a likely Democratic state, but of course, because of those two things, it's probably have changed, obviously. And I mean, I'd put New York as a likely New York as a as a likely Democratic state here. Joe Biden obviously pulled the state heavily by double digits by almost 23 points back in 2020, but obviously his mental health decline over the course made it so bad that it almost became a battleground state had he not dropped out. But it's the same thing where a lot of people in New York are getting tired of these, ruthless Democrats. And I think it's still going to be Democrat. It's just not going to be as Democratic leading as it was back in 2020. And I could say by and large, Maine will be Democratic, but it will be likely in the sense that it will be Democratic, but, that's dependent on what the popular vote is and saying and such. But really, that leads on to likely Republican states. And I think Georgia is one of them, and North Carolina is another, as well as Wisconsin. Wisconsin, obviously, because of the Republican National Convention going on there, and everything is especially after the assassination attempt on Trump. A lot of people respected him in Wisconsin, in Milwaukee especially, and they had one of the biggest audiences they'd ever seen before. And I know that sounds so Trump-like because it is. So I think Wisconsin is easier to say as a Republican likely state here. So we're looking at 261, 203. It's getting close here. Um, but obviously, this changes a lot for blue wall states, which is these four states here to be exact, because Kamala Harris might have a stronger show for African American voters, though she isn't African American. She's a Hindu Asian American. So, it's hard to say there for sure. And it's hard to say if she might even get the Latino vote. But as of recently, Nevada and Arizona have shown to be still in the direction of a Republican voting here. So it's looking as if she's not going to get enough to secure a Latino vote or an African American vote, even. And Tim Walz, I don't think he shows a lot of characteristic to even pull hard enough and stay strong in his home state. Home state in quotation marks, in his current governing state right now to secure it. So I don't think he'll be able to, but we'll get to that here in a moment. Virginia, and I have to talk about Georgia because Georgia. This is where I believe it was in Georgia is where all the George Floyd stuff was happening, and Tim Walz's response to that obviously was not the moral right answer, but people skip past that all the time. A lot of history is really just thrown out there and forgotten until it's insecurities mean nothing. So I don't think that differentiates the vote because Trump is holding a strong path, and of course you have to think as well that Kamala Harris hasn't even debated Trump yet, so we don't even know what she can fight on, as well as whatever Tim Walz can fight on against JD Vance, or if RFK Jr. were to spawn in the mix of this, what all three of them can fight on as well. Um, that's just a whole thing all in itself because RFK Jr. doesn't have a base on the electoral vote. He has a base on independent voters, which outshine a lot of certified Democrats, certified Republicans for sure. But Kamala Harris doesn't have a base, and Tim Walz is not carrying even a strong base in his governing state or his home state, Nebraska. So we already know his base is nothing. JD Vance, a lot of people are saying that he's not the right guy. And, I think Ben Carson or Vivek Ramaswamy would have been the better answer. But because he's the vice president or vice president elect, I think he has done substantially better than Mike Pence. He's trustworthy. He's not a traitor. He's not like Mitt Romney. So I think he has a baseline too, obviously being senator of Ohio and not being known so much for a politician, but knowing as an author. And Donald Trump, we already know, has a base because we saw that in the 2016 primaries. We saw in the 2016 election. We saw his presidency make, a great rate for the 4 years he was there. And then in 2020, it got all screwed over. But we know he already has a base. But if they don't debate, then Donald Trump has a better chance at landsliding this election by maybe possibly more states like Oregon or possibly like New Hampshire or New Jersey. But that's, uncertain as of right now. I'd also say is that Michigan at the moment is shown to be more likely Republican, as well as Pennsylvania. And I already know why for Pennsylvania, and that's because of the assassination attempt. It's also brought a lot of attention towards the attempt, as I've talked about it in previous videos. But it's also given more light to say, hey, whoever did that sucks. And I've heard a lot of people in my own family say that they were so close to killing him, and I think that's wrong. I'm sorry, but there's a lot of horrible people in this world. There's a lot of great people in the world that I believe in that other people don't. But saying someone's gonna die over it or should die over it is immoral and wrong. You don't have to like someone because of what they say, but to say that they should die for it is, unless they've done something against humanity that is a war crime, which Trump has not committed. Democrats have committed way more than that. We already know that with the drone strike attacks that Obama did that killed millions of, hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of innocent people in the Middle East. That was horrible. So, those are real war crimes, obviously, that we look out for there. So I think, in Pennsylvania, it's easy to say that the whole thing was bad, and a lot of people are looking at Trump as being the hero because of it. And Michigan, I just think is going to go in that direction, anyways. Um, that leaves Virginia and Minnesota. And, I've said, when it was Joe Biden, Virginia was leading a very slimly, like in Republican voting, and it hasn't been like that since 2004. But obviously, as new votes come out, they're trying to say that, oh, Democrats are doing extremely well, and they're going to go high and go all. We've seen that same. If you've been around since the 80s, in 1988 with Dukakis, they said, "Oh, Dukakis, he's gonna go 17% up against George H.W. Bush. He's gonna absolutely mop the floor with him." He didn't. We saw the same thing with Hillary Clinton, where it's like, "Oh yeah, leading by 7 points, gonna mop Donald Trump." No, didn't happen. It's saying now with point 0.5 and saying, "Oh, point 0.5, it's still a close margin, but we're gonna win it," and it's not proving so. But from a timeline of 1988 all the way up to now, they've been saying Democrats in August and August, September, October are like, we're gonna mop Republicans off the plane of existence, and none of them have been right. None of them since 1988. So those percentages obviously don't mean shit unless you go out and vote. And with Virginia, with Kamala Harris not having this base, I would care and think to say that it's a possibility that Virginia votes Republican, but it's not a certainty. It could be a very close margin here. And with Minnesota, I already talked about. He's Tim Walz burning his own state down that he governs, and he's really destroying it. I mean, Kamala Harris has done worse too because they're like two. It's like two Bernie Sanders combating with each other, but they don't have a base. Like Bernie Sanders has a base. No one likes him. Democrats don't like him, but he has a base. These people don't. These people are clueless. And that's what I'm going to focus on a lot, because if you don't have a base, you can't win. Like you learn this in school with point, evidence, analysis, conclusion. If you don't have a point, you don't have evidence. And if you don't have evidence, you can't analyze why your evidence is correct, because you don't have a point to give to that evidence that then furthers explain why it's okay. And therefore, your conclusion is that you're fucked. So they don't have a baseline at all. So I think when it comes to the election as of right now, being that Tim Walz isn't leading very high. He was only leading by 52% back in 2022 for governor. So I think going off of that, it's easier to say that maybe Minnesota and Virginia here are possibly Republican states here. But that's just how things are developing, and things are going to change. We still have 90, I think it was 97, 96 days left when you're seeing this, probably 96 or 95. So that is it from me, obviously, though. But if you did enjoy, please do like and subscribe. If you want to leave your opinions down in the description or just in the comment section, please do so by all means. But until then, I will see you all in the next political video. Thanks, guys, and peace out.